there. Oh, that's good. It's going to Facebook. That's awesome. All right. Welcome back to Judging Bouncy Balls. Juan Garcia, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, all the way from Nichols State University down in Louisiana, as I understand it. And really appreciate it. Would love for you to give us a little bit of an intro about yourself, kind of what took you to Nichols State, everything up to this point. How did you get there, and your coaching background? A little bit about you.
Yeah, I think my coaching background is definitely unique in the sense that I didn't play college soccer myself. So I think straight out of high school, I actually took like a gap year, ended up doing AmeriCorps and Triple C. And that's basically the Peace Corps, but the United States version of it. So everything's domestic. We were stationed actually out in Iowa. That was our base. We did about 14 different disaster relief projects, everything from tornado cleanup to fighting wildfires out in Austin, flood cleanup up in North and South Dakota, a lot of tornado cleanup both in Iowa, Wisconsin, Alabama, kind of just all around the area. It was a big year. It was right around 2011. So that year, Joplin and all that stuff that was going on.
Oh, wow.
So definitely got my fair share of experience that way in terms of learning how to be flexible and kind of figuring out what direction I wanted to go with after high school. That kind of led me to kind of coaching at that point once I got out. So started off coaching rec. My little sister was playing at the time, so got involved coaching rec that way. And then kind of from there, one thing led to another. I found I really had a passion for it. Ended up working at an indoor soccer place for a little bit. And from there, I was in charge of everything from running the leagues, tournaments, got involved in personal training, so like running our academy sessions and stuff out of there. And we ended up having a really good group. From there, got into club soccer. Club soccer went a different way with the politics and everything that was kind of going on. So actually ended up starting up my own club out in Virginia, kind of breaking off at that point. Took the girls that I had from rec into club when they were U10, and we started our own club with 13 girls. Kind of grew it to over 150.
Wow.
Just pretty much me doing everything from website creation, jerseys, marketing, budgeting. And I saw that group all the way through graduation of high school. So I was their same coach the whole entire time, which was nice. Got to see them grow. That kind of really challenged me in order to kind of get better as well and be like, hey, what does this group need now? This group is getting really good. What do I need to make sure that I add to my repertoire, my toolbox in terms of licenses and kind of growing and watching games and stuff that way as well. We ended up with one of the first futsal programs in Virginia. We ended up actually implementing futsal training year round as part of our program. In the winter, man, we'd take our 3 teams that we had that were from club and we'd split them up into 8 teams. So we'd be at the futsal facilities all day just to make sure everyone's getting games, everyone's getting touches. From there, I got opportunities to kind of run some academies, some summer camps at Super Y with Washington Spirit. Ended up being a DOC for another local club out that way in Virginia as well, while still coaching high school as well, since my group started in high school. So, and actually ended up coaching on the boys' side for the first 5 years of high school, and then got the opportunity to switch over to the girls' side and kind of really grow from there. But we got to the point where my 04s, which was our last group, we started with 01s. Our 04s were going into college at that point. We got them all with the college program, recruiting program that we started as a club. We ended up getting about 27 girls in those last 2 years placed on college rosters throughout the country.
Wow.
The D3. So for a little area for our little club, that was fantastic. We ended up top 10 in Virginia for most of the time while we were there. We'd get invited to showcases to play under different clubs just because they didn't have rosters to fill, teams to fill in those areas. So we kind of really grew our name for ourselves that way, which was nice. And then once that last group, that 04 group was ready to graduate and kind of go into college, I knew coaching in college was something I always wanted to do. So I figured instead of kind of starting over, going to find a different club or seeing where we're at, I watched my whole thing with this group was be as loyal to them as they were to me. They took a chance on me when we first started with 13 players, and we kind of grew the whole thing out. So I wasn't going to leave them to go to a different club. Once we kind of saw them through, then I kind of saw my opportunity to kind of start throwing my name out there, see if I could get an assistant job at a couple colleges. Just through networking and stuff, I ended up at Bethany Lutheran up in Minnesota, up in Mankato, D3 school. Spent last fall there for my fall season there. From there, I was lucky to find an opportunity at a D1 school here in Nichols in Louisiana, and I made the jump that following spring. So going from D3 to D1 in less than a year was kind of like a big step, especially not having played in college, but I've definitely paid my dues, grinded the entire time. So down here at Nichols right now, I'm looking forward to kind of continuing to grow and get better, and then hopefully in the next year or two find a head coaching job somewhere.
That's excellent. Well, thanks for sharing. Yeah, Mankato. You'll love the snow.
Down in Louisiana. I'm going to be honest; it's kind of the yin and the yang of the country.
Yeah, when I left Mankato that day in February, we had 3 feet of snow. It was -20, and I got on a plane at 6 a.m. When I landed finally at 8 p.m. here in Louisiana, it was 86 degrees. And it's completely different.
That's awesome.
I just had the opportunity of driving all over Minnesota for the last 2 days, and it was -42 wind chill in Worthington, Minnesota, Tuesday morning. So I think you made the right call.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, everyone down here is freaking out because the wind right now has it in like the teens for like these last 2 days, and like everyone's like doesn't know what to do with the freeze warning and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is fine. Like between
You're good. That's funny.
You know what? I guess you mentioned you took a club. What was well, you said you were able to coach high school. Was it girls and boys, or?
So I did 5 years boys, 3 years girls.
Okay.
For varsity at high school.
What did you find out like between club and varsity? So our big thing here is, they say to get, really recruited in that club sports is taking over basketball. Quite a few of the sports, it's all club based, but me and Jeremy are big high school guys, right? We're big community guys. We enjoy the locality of it. I guess what was the biggest difference between coaching the club versus the high school down there in the Virginia area?
I think Virginia's a little different, especially compared to where I'm at now in Minnesota, where high school is a really big thing down here. But in Virginia, especially at that time where we had DA programs before the GA came about, the DA wouldn't let some of those kids play high school. So it's like, hey, you have to choose whether you're going to play high school, whether you're going to play club year round. Luckily, like they ended up doing away with that rule, but especially like towards the city, you had a lot of schools where like the programs are probably a little bit watered down. But once those club kids were allowed to come back, then you have powerhouse matchups all the time. And they became super competitive. But I think from a recruiting standpoint, in Virginia especially, it's not that much through high school unless you're at one of the smaller like 2A, 3A schools. But those 6A schools that you have an ECNL or a GA club every 5-15 miles from each other. Like that's some of the richest soccer in the country at that point.
Wow.
They get more of those kids traveling around the country doing showcases and stuff than really focus on high school, especially since I feel like we're opposite of everyone else where we play high school in the spring and everyone else for the most part plays high school in the fall. We're here in Louisiana. They're playing high school soccer right now. It's January and February in this area. So a little bit different from a recruiting standpoint where we have like all those college showcases that people try and go to in the winter. So those kids in Virginia are coming off their club season. They're still in like their prime, as opposed to if we played high school in the fall before they got into club, then a lot of those, you're not like in that rep, getting those reps, playing at a high level all the time. So it's a little bit different.
Mhm.
You'll get some of those like schools out from the Midwest or on the West Coast that do a lot of showcases in the spring, just for that reason, because they're in rhythm and stuff that way at that point.
Yeah, here in Wisconsin, we play club in the fall and high school in the spring, and yet we're surrounded by states that's the exact opposite. And I guess my question is, I will wonder why. Fall sports, and as you know, in Minnesota, Wisconsin, is a lot better than spring sports because if you don't have a turf field, you're not touching grass here until May.
Yeah.
With snow melt, with the thaw, and that's got to be nice not having those issues down where you are.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, people just don't understand up here. We travel for soccer for club. Everybody's wondering, what we do, and it's a lot of indoor, a lot of gym, a lot of turf time, which is limited in this neck of the woods. But we do our best.
Which is why it's kind of surprising that futsal hasn't really taken off in that part. I know, like, at least when I was in Minnesota, like, it was just starting like grassroots level, as opposed to like when we're in Virginia, like we have national showcases, like there's regionals in New Jersey at that point, and they even have like women's pro teams over there in Virginia at this point now with football and everything. And you'd figure that in the Midwest, especially, that with field space being limited and gym space being there, like it would have taken off a lot faster. But I think it's also a lot more technical. And I think in some of the parts in the Midwest, and especially like here in Louisiana, where it's just a little bit behind in terms of that technical ability, depending on what pocket of the state you're in, then that kind of makes it hard for like new ideas to come in, people to stay in the area as well that kind of want to help and grow it. Like right now, I think we have one GA club for the entire state of Louisiana. So soccer's kind of been a little bit neglected out in this part. Most of the top players, either if you're able to go to Baton Rouge and kind of play out that way, then you do it. If not, you have players going to Mississippi or Texas that's closer, depending on what part of the state you're in, to kind of get that high-level training.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll get to that because I do want to talk to you about the ECNL versus GA versus the USYS. But do you recommend the futsal for
I do.
Is it touches? Is it for technicality?
For a little bit of both, especially speed of play. The one thing that I really love about futsal is you can't hide, right? It's 4v4 plus a keeper, and everyone defends, everyone attacks. And the second you get stopped, you start ball watching, or you get stuck in place, like you get exposed at that point. Either your team is playing down or you just can't keep up. So you either learn to adapt or you kind of end up not being able to hang at that level, especially with them removing a lot of the physicality out of it. After 5 fouls, it's PKs the rest of the game. So at that point, like, you really have to learn technical ability, speed of play, how to react. And I think one of the biggest things that hurts players right now is their ability to move laterally. And I think futsal does wonders for that.
Interesting, because I know Milwaukee's picked up, but then once you get Chicago, St. Louis, that's where there's a huge following for futsal, is what I've been told. We've gone to indoor training kind of year round, so we really don't take the break that maybe the futsal would deliver, but it's not a big, to my knowledge, there's really not much here in the Green Bay, at least Northeast Wisconsin, for that.
Yeah, and definitely, I have the pleasure of learning under some of the best coaches for futsal. The guy I grew up with out of Arlington and McLean that did personal training and stuff with us, he helped run one of the women's pro teams, and now he's the assistant coach for the women and the men for futsal for the United States. So, like, we learned futsal from some of the best guys in the country. We actually had, from my club team, we put 3 girls as alternates, and 1 girl actually made the national team pool and got to go play in a tournament at the 16 level.
Wow.
So, like, when we play it, we play it fast, and that's kind of some of the training I've added here at Nichols in terms of like working one-on-one with players on the side. Is we'll do everything with a small ball, with the futsal ball, kind of work on foot skills and stuff that way. And I think when I eventually get a head coaching job, like, that's going to be part of our sessions once a week at least, year round.
That's fantastic. Tell Nichols State. Where's Nichols State?
So we're at the bottom of the boot. We are probably about 45 minutes from New Orleans, about an hour and a half from Baton Rouge, about an hour and a half from some of the other bigger cities in Louisiana. About 4 hours from Houston, about 5 hours from Florida. So kind of in a good location in terms of that. Humidity is about 80% year round.
Well, that's it.
It's about 90% in the heat of the day.
It's like raining all the time.
Yeah, for the most part. So,
Sounds amazing.
With the weather, with the freeze warning, like it didn't rain, but just because of the humidity, it looked like we had like waterfalls on our cars the other day, just because of all the like condensation that came out. Just icicles everywhere with no rain anywhere. So
that's crazy.
It's fantastic to see.
Now, is it Thibodaux? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah,
Thibodaux. Jeremy was right. I knew it. And then, what is your mascot?
A colonel, so like a guy with a sword.
Okay, we were trying to figure that out too. Interesting mascot.
Yeah, definitely colonels, but I get stuck saying colonels all the time just because I read it that way. But it's definitely a colonel.
For 10 minutes before you came on, I'm like, it's colonial, and he's like, it's colonel. And I'm like, there's no R, and I'm like, I know, I'm with you.
So yeah,
man. Now, what is the conference that you guys are in down there for soccer?
We're in the Southland Conference, so we have our schools, a lot of Texas schools. So we'll have Texas A&M Commerce. We'll have Texas A&M Corpus Christi. We'll have Houston Christian. Now I'm just trying to blank on the rest. Southern is in Louisiana, and then a couple other schools out that way as well.
Okay. I'm trying to just piece it all. Now, do you have a football program?
We do.
You do?
We do.
And that they're also Division I?
They are. They actually won the conference this year.
That's awesome.
Fantastic. Because I did look up your school, about 5,600 kids, trying to do some research. What is your biggest, when it comes to recruiting, on the size of your school and what you guys have to offer, where do you start recruiting? Like, is it locally? Are you recruiting showcases? Are you based on your ID camps? I guess, where do you start?
A lot of it based on our ID camps for sure. That's where we kind of are able to talk to players one-on-one, give them evaluations. Usually when we have our ID camps, our players are involved as well. So they'll kind of get to see what they look like going versus college players, which is nice. But then from there, a lot of showcases we'll try and get to. Our recruiting budget isn't the biggest, so we'll do a lot of like video that we'll review online that people will email us. A lot of these showcases are doing a really good job of having stuff available remotely. So we'll be able to check out some games and stuff that way as well. And then through contacts and networks that we already have. That's kind of the big emphasis. But we want these kids to try and get a look at campus as much as possible. That's because you never want a kid to commit to coming here for 4 years without ever having touched down and on the campus or in Louisiana, see what the weather's like, see what the dorms and everything are like in the living situation. That's a big decision, and that's not something you want to take lightly.
Yeah, we're just starting to produce. I have a senior that's a tennis player, and she chose a Wisconsin school, but that was the big thing, right? The dorm room scared the living snot out of her. That 10 by 10 box that like she's used to home and the luxuries that we provide, and she's like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Yeah. The nice thing is our facilities here are great. So, I mean, once you get out of that freshman dorm, then anything else will have almost like apartment style. And they can
nice.
have anywhere from 2 to 5 people in those apartments. But they have their own washer and dryer built into all of them, a full kitchen. There's a freaking pool in the middle of the little complex for
nice.
everyone. So they'll be taking pictures in January, February while everyone's cold and sending them back home and kind of joking around with everyone that they're tanning out on February and everyone else is kind of dying in the winter, wherever they're at. But I mean, facilities and everything are top notch here, which is nice.
That's awesome.
I might have to throw my hat in the ring down there and get myself a master's or something. Where do you like? So ID camps are big, and we're starting to discuss that, right? Because we're talking to my daughter, and I know Jeremy's talking to his. Is where do you like for my daughter explains to me she doesn't want to stay in the cold. Well, that leaves a very large portion of this country. So, what do you recommend on? Instead of flying all over and trying to hit 7,000 colleges, which is never going to happen. What do you tell people your best option to just try to narrow it down, or, is it online tours? Is it conversation? Because right now we can't talk to a coach.
Right. I think biggest part is making sure what they plan on for at the moment being their major can always change, but making sure that school has their major. And then I'd probably narrow it down to at least 10 to 15 to kind of like really think about like actually going and visiting. If any of them have overnight residential ID camps, that's probably a really good look in terms of being able to sleep over on campus, see what the dorms are like, see what the cafeteria is like, kind of really get a good feel for what those coaches are like on a day-to-day basis. Same thing with if you're going to go to a couple visits, see if you can plan a couple schools that are around the same area. Even if one of them might not be on your list, you never know. Like, hey, like, let's say we're down in North Carolina, and you know that Salem is out that way, and North Carolina Wesleyan's out that way, and then you might have Guilford, who's not necessarily on your list because they're a D2, but maybe they're on the way, so you stop and take a look at that campus as well, because you never know. My biggest thing, especially when talking to recruits, is you don't know what you don't know. So you might think you have no interest in this place, or you might think you have no interest going to a big school or a small school, however it might be. But at the same time, you've never experienced it. And especially with teenagers that are 17, 18 years old, you're going to change their mind plenty of times. So they never know if they're going to like it or not until they're actually on campus and kind of setting foot and kind of dealing with that interaction.
You mentioned getting a lot of tape. I'm sure you get hours of tape. Is the best thing to do for a kid or a daughter or whoever to send you the tape? I know right now we're not in the communication or whatever time frame. We're under June 19th or whatever, 15th. They should still send it, correct? Still get their name in front of you?
Yeah, they can't. We can't reply back. I mean, in terms of like reviewing the actual film, but we can send back camp info and stuff like that. So usually it's best to kind of send that information along and send it multiple times. Every time you get a new one, every time you get a new highlight film or anything like that, to go ahead and send it just to kind of keep it top of mind for us, especially with the amount of emails that we get. But yeah, I mean, the more I would say, especially in regards to that film, make sure your best highlights are there first. Don't try and bury it a minute and a half in, but have it be that first thing that's going to catch your eye. Because I'm going to sit here and watch 30 different highlight films that are 3 minutes each. I'm going to get pretty bored after the first 45 seconds if I don't see something that I like.
I was going to say, so from a coaching perspective, how is that? Like, that's got to be at times. Do you ever just have to step away and like, I'm just not in the right mindset for this right now. I've got to go take a break and do something else.
Oh, for sure. Like I'm super organized where like I have to block out my schedule all the time. So like I know like, hey, I'm going to spend 30 minutes this day doing this, just reviewing film, so I can kind of be in that mindset ready to go in. Otherwise, like I'll get too distracted. I'll be trying to bounce all over the place, and I should be focused on the film, and I'm sitting there thinking about the schedule or practice for the next day, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Can they make or break an opportunity at a college in that first 30 seconds? Like if the film is bad, let's say a kid does a film and they send it and it's not very good. I mean, and you go through it and all of a sudden you're like,
doesn't know how to edit it.
right? And you're like, this is terrible. And boom, delete, moving on. Like, do you remember names, or if that, let's say that child or that kid now has the opportunity to do some decent work and send it back in? You're not remembering names, right? I mean, or are they burning bridges from day one?
No, they're not. I mean, you can always improve and kind of get better that way. But I mean, at the same time, it's especially at this level, at the D1 level, at the D2 and D3, you can definitely get away with it a little bit more. But at the D1 level, when I'm getting 100 a week, and you don't stand out in those first 45 seconds, like, it's tough for me to kind of sit there and watch the rest of the 2 minutes of that video.
Yeah. I'm assuming you take your roster and you look at what you have coming back, you look at what you've lost. And are you specifically looking for position? Are you looking for soccer players? Are you looking for athletes? What is your main first look?
It's tough. It's going to really depend on who you talk to at that point and kind of where the program's at. Right now, I think ideally we would be looking to replace positions that we're losing. So, like, if we know we're going to be light on wingers or light on outside backs, that kind of would be the position that you'd be looking at. But, like, we're coming off of a rebuild at this point. So at this point, you're just looking for difference makers where we're at. So whether that's a center mid, whether that's a forward, whether that's a goalkeeper, like at this point where we're at right now, in terms of trying to produce wins and kind of get better that way on the field, and kind of flip some of this roster over, then at this point you're taking best player available, and then it's our job as coaches to kind of make it work on the field.
What has the transfer portal done? Because we did, so my daughter and a couple of us from our club did the UW Milwaukee camp, and the coach did a really nice job of sitting down with the parents and just kind of talking about the portal and how kind of the numbers of how all these kids enter the portal thinking they're going to better themselves, when in fact the number is 2 in 10 to 3 in 10 that actually better their situation. Are you guys looking in the portal for players, or are you looking at everything?
We're looking at everything. I think the problem with the portal is that there's no guarantee, right? So, I mean, just because you say you're leaving and you're going to enter the portal doesn't mean, A, you get picked up, or 2, you find a school that you want to go to. So, I mean, you might not be playing here, but you get picked up at a school, let's say in South Dakota, and you hate the cold. Like, now what are you going to be miserable for the next 2 years as well? Like, you might be playing, but like the rest of your life, you're going to be upset about the fact that, like, you left warm weather for cold weather. So, like, there's no real guarantee. I think some of the schools in our conference do a really good job in the transfer portal, in terms of kind of getting those kids that have graduated and are kind of looking for that one extra year, or some of these internationals as well that, like, kind of hop in that portal, or kids coming from top programs in the country that are kind of looking for a little bit more playing time. Then they're going to go to these schools. But when you struggled for the last 10, 15 years, like our program has down here before I got here as well, like, it's going to be tough to attract the top talent from that portal as well. When they kind of look at your record and kind of see some of the struggles and don't have the chance to kind of see the direction that we're going in, or kind of the plans that we have for the future, to even get a phone call back or an email back is kind of tough at times.
Have you seen I know in the men's game, doing there's some great Twitter pages out there on soccer and college soccer, but the men's game seems to be really being overrun by international players. How internet, like, and on the women's side, I don't think that's happening. Do you see that going down the road, or is the men's just, because you read some of these teams, I think Marshall had like 75% of their roster was international, and they had men that were 24, 25 playing for them. So it seems that for the boys' side to get the high level recruiting is a heck of a lot more difficult than the girls' side right now.
I think the girls' side's picking up. I think the one thing you also have to keep in mind is there's more opportunities on the girls' side as well. I think on the men's side, a lot of it is a lot more of it is D1 or bust at that point. Whereas on the girls' side, you do have more being willing to kind of take that D2 or that D3 spot as well. I know, like when I was at Bethany Lutheran, for example, a good third of our roster was internationals. At that school, it's about 20% international as a whole. On their men's side, it was 50% international on the men's soccer team, and they had a roster of 40. So, I mean, it definitely varies. I think it's a little bit more expensive as well on the women's side as well. So that's kind of like a hindrance with some of those recruiting agencies and kind of things like that. But we're definitely looking, if that makes sense. We're definitely looking to bring in internationals. We're definitely looking different style of play, different higher technical ability, things like that, to kind of bring into that women's game. And you kind of see, especially in some of the bigger schools, bigger name schools, those Power 5 schools, they do get a decent amount of internationals on the women's side.
So why is it more expensive for the women's side? Just out of curiosity.
Recruiting fees, I believe, from like those agencies.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little tougher, especially coming from those different academies that they're coming from, different leagues and things like that.
Okay.
With the women's game not being as popular in terms of investment and everything until the last couple of years, then some of the fees and kind of stuff even out or a little higher.
Gotcha. Okay.
Have you seen any issues with NIL money?
At our level, not really. I don't think it's really hit soccer yet. I think it's probably coming in the 4 or 5 years, depending on how the rules and stuff go. Especially with the transfer portal rules, it's kind of those things change. But I think if we haven't seen it now with the COVID stuff and people getting their extra year and stuff like that, then I don't think it's really gonna kind of take over the sport like it did in football or anything like that.
Yeah, that's you brought up the COVID year. We are losing the colleges are losing the COVID year in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it? So
I believe so.
And so that'll actually help our daughters who are 26s because the COVID year, it gave all these kids an extra year because of 2020, correct? Because they didn't play sport in 2020, 2021, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
So we're seeing 5 and 6 year seniors, really?
Yep.
And then what does that do to your roster? I mean, because you have a scholarship player, is a scholarship a 4-year or it could be 5, it could be 6?
It's year to year. So I think at the end of the day, it comes out to how well these coaches and these programs plan this thing out. Because if you plan poorly, then you're stuck and you're going to have that conversation like, hey, like, I'm not renewing it for your 5th year, even though you're coming back because we don't have it in the budget. Or, hey, like, I might not be able to give you the same amount, but I can give you something in order to make it work. Or if you planned well ahead of time, then you're kind of able to kind of honor where you were at before. But those scholarships are year to year, so they can be changed at any time.
So if you come in with your freshman, you're offered a scholarship. Because how many scholarships does the women's soccer team get at Nicholls State? Or like full scholarships, right? Based on full?
So the way it kind of works is you get a set amount. So we're not fully funded. So while one school might get, I believe, fully funded, you get 13 or 14 scholarships. We only have 10 and a quarter to kind of play with. So it's definitely not an even playing field in that regard. So we have that money for that 10 and a quarter, and then we can divide that however we want in terms of how we give out scholarships and stuff that way. Now, the benefit that we have is we haven't raised tuition in the last 7 years. So we're one of the
cheaper legal?
Schools.
Because around here, it always goes up.
We're one of the cheaper schools in Louisiana. And I think from a recruiting standpoint, that's kind of the direction that we're looking to sell in terms of bringing in out-of-state players and kind of upping up our roster talent that way. So as an athlete, you get out-of-state tuition waived, and you get in-state tuition
Wow.
as an athlete. So, and then even though like our nursing program, anything in like kind of that STEM area is kind of like what we're really known for. We have one of the top 5, top 3 in the area in terms of nursing. We're still half the price of any East Coast school that I know. You're paying year round for our top program. You're paying about 21. So that includes room and board and everything except for books at that point. So
Yeah.
at that point, you get, let's say you have really good GPA, you get really good SAT or ACT scores, and your academic award is anywhere from, let's say, 3,000 to 7,000. That's a third of that, of your tuition at that point. And then we can come in with a 30% scholarship, which would be like $6,000. And then at that point, you're paying between $5,000 and $10,000 for the year, depending on what major you're at.
Sold. We'll take it.
Yeah.
No need for tape, Juan. No need for any recruiting. Just send the paperwork, buddy.
But like at that point, like I know kids that I have friends that have daughters that are playing up in different states, or like you go to New York or somewhere, like you're starting at 30, 40 grand
Yeah.
before you get any scholarships or anything like that. Same thing in Virginia. So like at that point, that's kind of the direction that when we're looking at these East Coast schools or schools out in like Michigan or the Midwest that are super expensive, that's kind of the recruiting standpoint that we're trying to lure some kids with. Hey, come to Louisiana. I know weather sucks and it's going to be hot all the time and humid, but you're going to graduate college by that time with little to no debt at that point.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I just think about some of the Power 5 schools. I mean, you look at, I just had somebody tell me about Clemson, and that was 55,000 was the starting point, and that didn't even include, I don't think, room and board. I mean, that's a huge selling point to come out of school. You still get to play at a Division I level and not have a ton of debt.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we always every soccer trip we take, we'll pick a school, and we've done most of the Big Ten. And this past year we did Notre Dame just to see the campus, and that's a different animal. I'm going to be honest. That's probably the prettiest campus now, besides the fact that I can't stand Domers. But that's here nor there. But it was $87,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that I think that included like a $12 discount at the bookstore if you knew a guy. But that's ridiculous. I mean, that's $400,000 to get out of college. Now, one thing for you guys, and what in this few seminar, I guess we'll call them, that we've sat with coaches and some different things, is they say that they're always looking for the academic athlete, because they can get, like you said, the school can give money based on academics more than you can give soccer scholarships.
Correct.
So if the kid can get if you can save some of the scholarship because the school's giving money for academics, that's a plus for both the program and the kid.
Absolutely.
So it helps.
Now,
so we should circle that, the GPA, big circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And then not every school is like that. So some schools you can't stack athletic money with GPA money.
Oh, really?
But our school does. So that's one of the benefits that we have as well.
Interesting. I just assumed they all could do that. I didn't realize that was a selective.
Yeah, no, some schools you can't stack at all, which makes things tough as well. I think you'll see it a lot of like D3 schools, especially since they can't offer athletic money. Then you're definitely looking to make sure that your academics are top notch going into those schools.
Interesting.
Yeah. How far are your players? Where are they coming from? How far out in the world?
We have a girl coming in from Sweden, an international. We have girls from Hawaii. We have a girl from Virginia coming in 2025. Nevada, Florida, California, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. So we definitely got a good mix.
Wow. So what's your territory then, Juan?
Mine right now is I've been trying to hit up Virginia, East Coast schools So Virginia, Michigan, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, that area that's kind of that I know like the back of my hand is really rich in soccer.
Okay.
How many coaches do you have on the staff?
Right now, it's just myself and our head coach, and then his wife is the operations person as well.
That's not a lot of people to handle a lot of country there.
No, it's not. But for 2025s, we're pretty much already almost done. We're only going to need about 4 or 5 players. We got a couple on the watch list, one with an offer already. And then we're kind of, my focus right now has been on 2026s. So going through social media, kind of combing out accounts and being ready to talk to them come in June.
So that's a great thing. So you guys are starting to go 2026. So if you are in that age group, which our daughters are, that film should be going out already. And now I think we have, but I'm just like start to narrow down where we're sending it. Start to try to get on your radar if we want to go. Okay.
Absolutely.
Huh.
So just out of curiosity, Juan, how does a place like Nichols view Wisconsin soccer or Midwest, like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois? Like, what's the general perception about soccer out of Wisconsin?
It's definitely growing, especially me being a little bit familiar that way with my time over at Bethany. I saw all the clubs and worked in some of the clubs out in Minnesota. So kind of saw some of those showcases. Was able to do some of the college showcases that they invite different coaches out to, like the exact camps and the rush camps and stuff like that, out in Iowa, out in Minnesota, out in Wisconsin as well. Just kind of see some of that soccer. I think it's a little bit more physical and a little bit focused on the athlete at that point in terms of being a little bit direct. But you can see certain clubs really trying to kind of play everything to feet, kind of move everything quickly and kind of pick up that style of play. But it's just different, getting people used to different styles of play.
Okay. I can see that.
Big thing. and you had mentioned it, and it's well known in the club. You know, you have ECNL, you have GA, and then the USYS, which we are in the USYS, E64 league. You know, the ECNL touts their chest as they're getting everything from every scholarship out there. And then GA is kind of little brother to ECNL, that they're fighting for every little crumb. And then there's USYS, which I don't know where that lands. What do you see as a college coach? Are you strictly looking at one avenue, or does that matter to you at all?
I think for where we're at, we can't be picky, if that makes sense. There's definitely players that can play at different levels. And you can find someone playing in that National League, that 64 league, just as easy as I could find someone on ECNL RL or GA or regular ECNL. I think a lot of those teams in that 64 league or in that ECNL RL league could probably hang with some of the lower level GA teams or some of the lower level ECNL teams based on demographics. Based on what team you're playing. So obviously the top team coming out of Virginia is probably going to do pretty well, but the 8th team out of that age group would probably be a little bit closer to what some of these E60 or what some of these 64 teams or some of these lower level GA teams. So, I mean, it's all subjective. You're going to have players that can play at every level. The thing that you have to look at is kind of know what kind of player you're looking for, for your team, and kind of identify characteristics that you want that will translate no matter what. Because my job, once you get here, is to make you the best player you can be. At that point, like, it's on me to help develop you and make sure that you can kind of hang at this level based on when we brought you in. Especially when you start recruiting kids at 16, 17 years old. They're not going to be the same player by the time they're 21, 22.
That's true.
Probably not be the time when they get to campus, they'll be different. These young ladies switch quickly.
And speaking of that maturation process, what do you find is the biggest shock for a high school player that walks into your program? Is it the physicality? Is it the workouts? Is it the weightlifting? You know, like, what is it that they find is the biggest surprise from high school to college?
I think speed of play and the physicality are 1 and 2. And then at this level, at the D1 level, it's how structured everything is, where like your whole day is planned out for you from the second you step on campus till winter break or until November, December at that point. You know what time your workouts are, what time your classes are, what time you're lifting, what time your recovery time is, what time you're getting on the bus, what time you're having lunch. Like it's all planned out.
It's funny. I said that to my daughter. I'm like, hey, this is the way. Like, this is what some people really don't like about Division One, because I've heard that from other people. And she's like, that sounds amazing. I wouldn't have to think about any of my schedule. They just do it all for me. I'm like, oh my god. I said you say that now, but you might not like it when you're in it. I don't know.
That's the struggle though when you're done though, right? So like you graduate college, you're an adult, you're out there in the working world, and like now all of a sudden it's not structured. Now how do you adjust?
Yeah,
now I don't have anyone telling me I have to wake up and go to the gym at 6 a.m. or I have to be at work at this time, or I don't have any, like I have all the time in the world, and a lot of girls or a lot of players like struggle with that. I mean, like, oh my god, now I can do whatever I want. I don't have anywhere to be. Like, it's a different problem.
I could see that for sure.
We didn't have any clubs, and I played club rugby, and we didn't have any structure at all, so I didn't have any problem adjusting. I just tried to keep clean.
Not right.
Well, hey, a question on the recruiting side. There's all these NCSA, and we talked about me and Jeremy have talked about a couple others. You kind of, it's a fee, and they do. I'm sure you know what that is, right? Mm-hmm. What is there? Is there a benefit to that, or is that I've been told that that's kind of a Division III lower budget type recruiting versus Division I, or is that kind of a misnomer? Where do you guys use that in any way?
Yes and no. I mean, part of the problem is a lot of those emails go straight to spam, just because it's from like an automatic template, and Google recognizes it so often that some of those things just get flagged automatically, so we won't see them. But at the end of the day, they're not doing anything you couldn't do on your own, if that makes sense. So if you are not willing to put in the work yourself and you kind of want that boost, or you don't know what you're doing, it's kind of pretty helpful that way, just because you get templates and you get you can kind of see roster size and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, if you are really serious about it, then you can kind of find your own way to get about it without having to use one of those services and be just as effective.
Okay.
And that's kind of the route I know that we're choosing to do, is for my daughter to do her film, to get it out there. It's kind of her deal. It's not my dream. And just there to help. But these technology today, it's beyond me. These computers.
Yeah.
We used to have floppy disks, right? I mean, you put in a thing. Nowadays, I'm like, where do we store this bad boy? So I'm in the dust.
What we were able to do my last year with that last group coaching club is like all my focus was on this group, right? So our website, we had a whole page dedicated to all of our players, and everyone was listed, what their major was, what their GPA was, and a link to their video right there. But then we took it a step further. We took one of these kind of like link trees, and you see all these like barcodes and everything that everyone has, like the square ones.
Yeah.
QR codes. So we actually took it a step further, and we took one of the contact apps. I believe it was like Link, where like people use for like business cards, like exchange information and everything. I built a main page for our club in there and listed everyone as like an employee, all the players with their pages and everything. And then each one got their own QR code. So with the QR code, not only would we put it on like the brochures and everything that we would hand out, but we actually got the QR codes 3D printed and just put them on their jersey. And then they had the QR code that they could save to their Apple wallet. So like anytime they'd go up to a coach, they could just scan the QR code and it'll take them and have all their info to go right to their page. And they would have like their highlight video, their stats, kind of what they're looking for, their contact info, and kind of able to exchange information just on the fly. And coaches seem to really love that when we were at tournaments and they'd come out, hey, like want to talk to this player, they just scan it and they have all their information there. They don't have to sit there worrying about a brochure or taking down notes or anything like that. And that kind of
So it was on their jersey?
Yeah, it was on their jersey. It was just on their sleeve.
Okay, Eric. Eric's listening to this. He could. So let's make that happen next year.
Our executive director of our club. So that would be great. Just scan me. Just like a boop. Pretty soon they'll have the little gun from McDonald's and be like boop, boop, boop.
That's awesome. That's a great idea. I give you a lot of credit. We've dabbled in some of that stuff, but not to that level. That's a really cool idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, especially those apps are out there to be used, and not people aren't really using them the right way. So I'm like, well, we can kind of turn this into this homepage and kind of do it that way, and then it kind of all works. And that way, me as a coach, I have one that gives you access to everyone's. So I'll go up, talk to a college coach, I'll just introduce myself and just be like, hey, here's all of our players, and just have their phone scan my phone, and all of a sudden they have 20 players' info, and they're like, oh my God, okay, this is pretty cool. And they'll actually take the time. It's something that they'll remember because it's different than everyone else. And then they'll actually sit there, go back, and kind of, you can see how many clicks and how many views and where they're coming from. And be like, oh, there's someone looking at the app on Wednesday from California or from Louisiana or from Florida. And we kind of go back and think about what schools and stuff we were talking to. So you can kind of figure it out, even if you don't have their info and stuff, which is pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. That's a great idea.
Absolutely. Are you headed are you going to Tampa in February 23rd, 24th?
I don't believe so. I think right now we are kind of done with recruiting at the moment. Everything's on a kind of pause just based on trying to get our spring and everything kind of going. And then we'll probably pick back up after Mardi Gras or after spring break and kind of go from there, especially with there only being two of us at the moment. Then it's just kind of looking at film and stuff for now.
Makes sense.
I'm gonna use that at work tomorrow. I'm be like, I'm gonna pick that up after Mardi Gras. But if you do change your mind and you want to come to Tampa, I'll be down there, and it's part of the podcast. You get to go for beer or something. That's on the podcast. That's about all we have.
So, Juan, just out of curiosity, do you find yourself finding more out of ID camps or more out of these type of tournaments, like an ECNL tournament or a GA tournament or USYS? Is that where you find them, or is it more out of do you find the ID camps to be more beneficial?
The benefit of the ID camp is, for the most part, it's a kid that wants to be at your school, right? So you don't really have to sell them on nickels. You're kind of selling them on the program and kind of what the future looks like and things like that. The benefit of kind of going to these showcases is that I might be going to look at one kid who emailed me, but I could also find 4 other kids in that game from that same team or the team they're playing against or the field behind me.
Sure.
And I can end up casting a wider net at that point and following up with kids that way as well. So it just kind of depends. So you go to a showcase that has 400 teams, you're going to get more than the 5-10 kids that you're looking for. But at the ID camp, if you have 30 kids, those 30 kids are interested in kind of probably 3/4 of them want to be here. There's some kids that are probably just coming just to come.
Yeah.
But you at least kind of see that potential as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this is just a question I have. So when you receive film and you're sending out invites for your camp, is that kind of general, like, hey, we're just going to send it to everybody? Or are you guys looking, or are you fairly honest with kids saying, hey, look, not interested? Or when does that become reality instead of, and I'm just asking from a parent, like, hey, if my daughter's interested in Nicholls State or St. Leo down in Tampa, they're like, hey, come to our camp. But at what point is it worth the trip for me to send my daughter down there? Like, is there some interaction like, hey, this is a viable option, or this is just we'd love to have you to our camp?
I think if they're freshman or sophomore age or 8th grade, it's probably a little too early. Because the other thing you want to make sure they can do is making sure that they have a good showing, right? So while it might be a really good idea for that freshman or that sophomore to come to our camp just to kind of get the nerves out and kind of see what those camps are like and kind of go for the experience that way. But once you narrow it down to the kind of 5 to 10 schools that you're really interested in, then you want to make sure that you're kind of ready to go and ready to have a good showing, right? So at that point, making sure that the coaches kind of seen your film beforehand, if you can, had some sort of interaction with them. And sometimes they will personally invite you to kind of come to those camps as well and kind of lead you to.
Well, that's not good. We'll just wait and see if Juan can jump back on here real quick. But yeah, that's a bummer.
No,
Man, a lot of good stuff so far.
he's the square
Coming back here, so yeah, no worries. He'll be jumping on here in a second.
That's what I was interested in too. Is just getting to the point where, like, my question that I want to ask is, when you're personally invited to a camp, that's a really good thing versus
Yes.
just a general camp invite, right?
Correct. Yeah, I would assume it's going to be much better if you get that personal invite, because at least it shows from that perspective that there's some interest from the school, and it's not just you, showing up. Now, do they pay your fee if they invite you, or do you still have to pay?
I heard they can pay your fee, like your entrance fee into the camp.
Gotcha. Okay,
But I
that would
don't
make
know, that's
sense.
another-
Yeah, you got to be probably pretty good to get that.
It's usually $100, $200. I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah, it's usually not too bad.
How do we get to see if where Juan is here? Oh,
Yeah. Oh, we got 2 wands.
it's coming back on the bottom right. Come on.
I have a feeling that maybe his battery was starting to go because I saw he moved. And so we might have
had to
It definitely was.
charge it. There he is.
put him into a bad reception area. No worries. It's all good.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No,
No
you're
worries.
good.
Hey, so you were just talking about, and I'm very interested in this. So if you invite a player to your camp, like, right, if a personal invite is what you're looking for as a player, correct?
Correct.
Versus just a general, hey, come on down type of deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, it could be the difference between me taking the time to shoot you an email from our personal email to me just hitting select all in my camp distribution list and sending it. And then you see it's from a template.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
kind of the big one, how you know.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's
No,
what we're
it-
looking for. Personal emails. All right, Juan.
Right.
I mean,
No,
it's the same way as if your kid's emailing me, right? And
Yeah.
they email me from a template, or they don't have the right school name, or they're saying, "Hey, we saw you had a fantastic season." I'm like, "What school are you looking at? We won 117-1. What a fantastic!" Like at that point, like
Delete.
I don't know if I'm reading the email or not.
does that
No,
happen?
and
a lot? I've heard stories about that.
Oh, I mean, it happens at least once a week.
Really? Wow.
Because that was one of the big things. There's a book out there, Looking for a Full Ride. It's by Renee Lopez. And we're trying to get Renee on the show. Maybe a little knock here, we'll get her on. But it explains that, like, literally you need to start with a blank template. Not template's a bad word, but a blank email. Type in the coach's name. Do some research on the school. Take your time. Because I can imagine how frustrating it is to get that email like, hey, great season, want to play for you. And you're like, boop, boop, delete.
Yeah. It's like, that's not
Yeah.
my name. That's not my school that I'm at. Like,
That's
sometimes
crazy.
you'll reply, did you mean to send this to me? Like, do you need me to send it to the right coach? Like,
Oh, that would be so great. Except for the player, like, ooh, cross them off the list.
I mean, now it's also happened where, like, the player's quality, right? So you're like, hey, like, I know you were meaning to email FSU, but you sent it to me. Like, we're interested. If you want to give us the time of day at that point, like,
Yeah, that's true.
It is funny though, right? Everything changes with talent. You're like, well,
Yeah.
I can be coach whatever if you want me to, if you come here.
Yeah.
Oh, so Well, just, and we've kept you for an hour. We really appreciate you coming on. This is kind of why we did the podcast was simply this, right? Two dads that just like to talk. But then we kind of got into it and really started to ask questions. And we talk a lot about turf versus grass. And we have an episode called TFPM, which is just travel farther, pay more. I mean, that's youth sports today in general. But this is one where we really appreciate you coming on from a viewpoint of an assistant coach, of a coach that hopefully next year you're at the head coach facility and you come back on and we can talk about being the head coach.
Absolutely. Now, you asked an important question though. Do you guys prefer turf or grass? Because I'm one way hard in the paint at that point.
I'm a grass guy.
Yeah. I think just from the aspect of the health of the players, grass is now we live in the Midwest. So there's only, if we had grass, we wouldn't be playing. So we do have our high school stadiums, our turf.
Yeah.
But our club is a grass club. And what's funny is we've hosted our 3 years now, our state championship, our state cup on grass, and every other club, the Milwaukee, the Madisons, they all play on turf. So we always hear the little bit of bitching that it's too long. It's this or that. And, but
that's the beauty of it, right? So I love a good grass field. I love the fact that it's gamesmanship at the end of the day that you can manipulate it however you want. So these turf fields are all built pretty much the same freaking size. So you get a bunch of teams playing the exact same way, almost like robotic soccer at times, where I remember for high school, I got the option, hey, what dimensions do you want the size of the field for our team? It's okay, well, we know that we're going to play 3 in the back. We know that we're going to high press. So we're going to go the smallest field possible. We're going to throw off your angles. We're going to press the crap out of you. And you're going to be frustrated not knowing how to adjust, where your width is, and can you play a different kind of style of soccer at that point? And I mean, it comes back to bite us in the butt the other way, where we go and play on these super wide fields, and all of a sudden we have to adjust formations. And maybe I still want to go 3 in the back, but I'm going to have to go 3-3-1-3 with 3 holding midfielders to kind of clog up those gaps in order to not get killed on a counterattack on the width, since they're going to try and play us and stretch us super wide. So we learned how to adapt that way. But, I mean, we played on the girls' side. We played one of our regional games versus a school from Loudon that had a really good season just like us, but we knew that they were used to turf. So we knew that the weather was going to be crap. And we tell our AD, hey, don't cut it and let it grow. And it's going to be choppy. We know how to play. We know how to play on crap fields. So
I love it.
We go up 3-0 in the first 15 minutes because they don't know how to react to a bouncing ball, and they're frustrated and oh, this field is crap, and we're flying at that point. So I mean, you can adjust it same way even in the Premier League. You go, the old Wembley field was the widest one, 20 yards wider than any other field at that point. It changes how you play.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you have to, as a coach, you have to know how to adjust, and you kind of take that as part of your personality of your team. Hey, we don't take it for granted. This is what makes us us. This is our community. This is kind of our area and how we play. It's a blue collar town, so we're going to put in a good shift. That all kind of plays into that identity of that team and kind of how you look to attack things. And everyone can play fantastic soccer when it's 90 degrees out and perfect weather and grass is great or turf is great, but can you play the same way, same kind of passion when you muck it up and kind of learn how to play a different style? At the end of the day, that's what the game's for. You can manipulate however you want. It's all gamesmanship at that point.
Can you be a mutter?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what's funny is you just mentioned that they couldn't judge the bouncing ball. That is literally how this podcast got its name, because we were sitting there watching kids that couldn't judge a bouncing ball. They would watch it bounce, and then it'd bounce over their heads, and we're like, that's got to be our podcast name. So you hit it on the head.
Somebody blamed it on dads, because they say that when we're younger or when we have kids, if we have boys, we go play catch in the yard, we throw the football, and they judge distance, but we never do that with our daughters. And I'm like, don't blame me for this mess. And I only had daughters, so probably neither one of them, you know. But that's crazy because in rugby we were able to manipulate the field because we'd bring a fast team that we'd play and we'd shrink the field down, and it helps you control the wings, it helps you control the width, and it's amazing what a few yards can do. And I'm assuming in soccer too, how to handle that. And
well, yeah, especially like we'll play a fast team, and like usually like everyone's counter for if you're gonna play like a team that's really fast is, oh, we're gonna offside trap it and hope that it works. Like if we don't time it correctly, we get burned. And I'm like thinking one day, I'm like, well, why don't we just do the opposite? Like instead of playing that high line, I'm gonna drop that line to 25, 30 yards out. So there's no space for you to run in behind me to kill me at that point. If they're going to play the ball over the top and you're trying to play it into the 18, like at the end of the day, like my keeper's there and that ball's got to be perfect. So I'm going to leave a giant gap in midfield knowing that you're going to play it over the top and we're going to have enough time to recover and we're going to take your speed away that way. Like you're going to be onside the entire game, but there's going to be no room for you to run. So how do you adjust at that point? And a lot of teams can't because they're used to just plan A and they don't really have a plan B at that point.
I suppose that cuts down on a lot of through balls too then.
Yeah. Nothing's going to be played behind us ever.
Right. There you go.
See, Jeremy, we're learning about this sport. One day we're gonna be all right.
Someday.
Hey, one of Paul who listens to us, he's a friend of ours. He asked if you can tell if a kid is handling their social media account or a parent, and then if it is a parent, does it hurt your thought of the kid?
For me personally, I don't think it bothers me, but I think yes, there's a way you can tell, especially if everything is posted at like the same time all the time. Like you can probably tell it's someone that's like on a schedule that someone just got off and they're posting it before dinner or like after dinner every day, like kind of taking advantage of stuff that way. But for the most part, you can tell a lot by the interactions. If they're like posting on other people's accounts or the responses back that they get on their account, they're replying back to someone, then you can kind of tell usually if it's a kid or an adult.
Interesting.
Does it throw you off one way or the other? Like if it's a parent, are you like, maybe they're not our kid based on the fact that is it their dream or is it the parent's dream?
Not really, because I think at the end of the day, some kids do need that extra help. At the end of the day, they're 16, 17 years old, like I said. So it might stop me from interacting with that post a lot, but that wouldn't keep me from like keeping tabs on them.
Interesting, because everybody says, don't, if you're a parent, let them do it, blah, blah, blah. But that's good to know. Maybe
good to know.
I'll help a little bit, even though she doesn't want my help. Well,
nice.
Do you have anything left for us?
Anything you'd like to add or you'd like people to know about you or Nicholls State or anything like that?
I think at the end of the day, like, just don't be afraid to reach out. I mean, even if, especially when you're setting up phone calls and you're kind of first going through that recruiting process, don't say no to anyone in those first few months, even if it's a school that you're not interested in or you don't think you might be interested in. One, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. Maybe that coach you end up having a really good relationship with that coach, or they can kind of help recommend you to someone else. But also just get the nerves on the practice out, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times, like, I've been the first person one of these kids has talked to at that point, and it's just trying to make them feel comfortable, trying to help them out, knowing that it's their first one as well. And just kind of, even if my job at that point is just to help get them ready later on for the other coach that they're talking to that they really want to talk to later on, or different school that they're going to end up at, like, if that's my part on their journey, that's my part. I'm okay with that. But it's just trying to help that kid out to help them play soccer at the college level, because there's definitely room for almost everyone at this level, whether it's Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, JUCO, like there's a place for someone if you really want to play. So don't limit yourself right off the back by not knowing what you don't know.
Yeah, makes sense.
Plus, you never know where. Like you're an assistant coach today, you'll be a head coach maybe tomorrow, right? So you don't want to burn a bridge. You don't want to do anything else because you could transfer to a school that makes sense for a kid. And
like one of our players that we just signed, I'd been talking to since I was at Bethany. And
Oh, wow.
at the end of the day, like the opportunity came up from D3 to D1. I was actually the very first coach that she talked to and very first visit that she came to Bethany. And I ended up being her last as well, where she came to visit us at Nichols, and then we offered her a spot and she signed that day. So 2 years apart, but it was first one and last one at the same time, different schools. So
That's
at
cool.
the end of the day, the relationship I build with them is genuine, and they know I want to help. So even if they're reaching out, asking me about a different school and what I know about their program, like I'm more than happy to give them some advice and kind of let them know what I know. I'm never going to talk bad about anyone at a different program or a different school, but I can just kind of guide them in one direction or another in terms of helping them find the facts and knowing what questions to ask and kind of seeing what red flags or green flags they have for them and kind of what they're looking for in the process.
That's pretty cool.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we really appreciate it. Hopefully one day our paths will cross at a tournament and ID somewhere down the road and we can introduce ourselves.
That'd be
Just to
awesome.
say hi. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
This has been a ton of fun
Thanks
for
having me
us.
on.
Yeah.
It's been great. Yeah, hang on for a second after we hang up. There's a technology's got to upload a little bit, but yeah, have an awesome night and good luck in the future with potential jobs and all the recruiting.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Get a couple more wins, would you?
Yeah, we'll get there.
All right. Hold on one second.